was the war that was never going to happen.
Я считаю то, что происходит, военным преступлением.
The invasion that shook the world.
I just can't imagine living in the world without Ukraine. I can't imagine that.
And the fight back that took everyone by surprise.
The big question now, how much longer will the West continue to support Ukraine's defence?
The war in Ukraine 1 year on. For the stories and analysis, watch on BBC iPlayer.
Discussing Rishi Sunak's new deal on Brexit. Politics Live on BBC Two. Here's Joe Coburn.
Today, tea with the King and a new Brexit deal. Is Keir Starmer radical enough? And are we too obsessed with race? This is Politics Live. Joining me today, Conservative MP Laura Farris, Labour MP Clive Lewis, staff writer for The Atlantic magazine Helen Lewis, and journalist and presenter Inaya Folarin Iman. Today, a new Brexit deal on trading arrangements in Northern Ireland.
Morning, Mr Johnson. Quick word on today.
Will it get the backing of this former Prime Minister and his Brexiteer allies? And bring back power sharing in Northern Ireland? This is Keir Starmer's ambition.
To create more wealth, lead Britain out of its low-wage, high-tax doom loop.
So would taxes be lower under a Labour government? Actor Idris Elba says we're too obsessed with race. Is he right?
I stood up to my great height and I said, "Call me madam."
And former Commons Speaker Betty Boothroyd dies at the age of 93. Well, after weeks of discussion, talks, postponements and speculation, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, and Chief of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, are in final talks in Windsor before signing off a new Brexit deal for Northern Ireland. Now, it's a big moment for UK politics and for Rishi Sunak's premiership because there's still a huge amount of jeopardy around this deal because we don't know yet whether it will have the support of the Democratic Unionist Party in Northern Ireland or Brexiteer Conservative MPs. One government figure told BBC News, "Let's hope this is one of the last great rollercoaster moments of Brexit." Laura, will it be?
I hope so. Everything I've read about it makes it sound like a significant achievement of statecraft, and I think it also indicates the beginning of a new relationship between the United Kingdom and the European Union that's partly a function of the personality of the Prime Minister. And it's, I think, implicit in this that he's been able to strike a new relationship with the European Union leadership. And I think this is a really important reset moment that will get trade flowing, get Northern Ireland functioning again, get power sharing up and running at Stormont. And I'm very, very pleased to see it today.
Do you think it'll be the last of the great rollercoaster moments, the drama that we have seen since the UK left the EU?
Probably not. We've got the vote yet still. May need to have. If
well,
we have a vote,
Sunak
if we
said
have a
Parliament
vote,
would be able to express a view, whatever that means exactly.
If we have a vote, I mean, there will probably, and even a view will probably still lead to some dramas, I'm sure. And ultimately, I guess one of the big problems for Rishi Sunak, and I mean, first of all, I welcome this. If he's got a deal on the table, I think myself and I would imagine the Labour Party will welcome this because Brexit hasn't been the success that it was that we were told it would be. It has cost us economically billions of pounds because of the way that the oven-ready Brexit that was negotiated by the last Prime Minister was put into place. But if it does go ahead, then clearly the Prime Minister is going to have problems on his backbenches. We know there will be MPs who will be vocal and vociferous about this, potentially. They may undermine it. We know the DUP might not accept it. But I guess ultimately, if I'm thinking about it, this is progress. And would it be the last thing that we see on this, the last roller coaster ride? No, because Europe is so often displacement activity for other things in this country. So I don't think it'll be the last thing. But hopefully we can now move on. as Labour is saying, to talking about sectoral deals for different parts of the economy. That's the only way, one of the few ways, that we're going to get ourselves out of the hole that we're in the economic mess that we're currently in. So I think this is a staging ground. If he can do this, if he can make this, then he can start talking to the EU about a wider set of negotiations with the EU.
What do you think, Helen? It is a big political moment. Do you think, to some extent, it will lay to rest all of the discussions, all of the disputes that have gone on over the last few years?
I do, for once, feel quite in tune with, I think, the median British voter, which is why haven't you sorted all of this out yet? It's been 7 years. And I think one of the things that does, a rare note of praise for me for a politician here, which is I think it shows that the EU are amenable to concessions. If you don't go in as a rabid ideologue or, let's be honest, a bit of a lying charlatan. I'm not saying...
Who are you talking about?
I'm not saying our previous Prime Ministers had those issues. I'm just saying those are the kind of thing that could have been a problem.
Well, you know, it's only been 3 years since we were actually able to implement the vote. So I would argue that this has taken a lot longer, partly because there was a campaign for years to try and overturn the vote. But it's not just the UK that I think have been quite defensive and have sometimes grandstood when it comes to these negotiations. The EU have also seemingly tried to make an example of the UK. So there's been both sides in terms of hampering negotiations. But on the point about whether or not this is the last Brexit theatre, I think we have to remember that Brexit wasn't just a kind of procedural, technocratic response. It was also about sovereignty, democratic renewal and immigration. And these are still huge ongoing issues that many of the British public don't think have been resolved yet. So I don't think it will be the last Brexit bust-up.
Right. I mean, in terms of choreography, there's going to be a lot going on, we expect, this afternoon, unless there are any last-minute hitches. Let's have a look at this tweet from Ursula von der Leyen from the European Commission. There she is arriving. I'm glad to be in the UK today to meet with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. I'm looking forward to turning a page and opening a new chapter with our partner and friend. Now, they are meeting in Windsor. We've also had confirmed that Ursula von der Leyen, as the head, if you like, of the European Commission, will be having tea with King Charles. That caused a certain amount of controversy over the weekend because it was thought that it might be linked to the deal, but it is separate, just happening in the same place. I think we can talk to our chief political correspondent, Nick Eardley, who is at Windsor. Tell us a little bit more about how the day is going to unfold.
Hi, Joe. Good afternoon. So we expect the Prime Minister here pretty soon, actually, and Ursula von der Leyen not long after that. They're going to be in that fancy hotel behind me, finalising these talks. We are told that there are still elements of the deal that need to be finalised, but let's face it, we wouldn't be in this situation if they weren't on the cusp of signing it. So assuming they do, there will then be a cabinet call where the Prime Minister will confirm everything to ministers. There'll be a press conference in Windsor where we get the big sell from Rishi Sunak and Ursula von der Leyen. I think for the Prime Minister, the initial focus will be on the idea that he's got rid of a lot of the trading barriers that were seen to be put in place by the initial Brexit deal. He'll sell this as a big win for Northern Ireland and say that it restores some sovereignty and it gives the people of Northern Ireland more of a say over rules. And then the PM this evening will go back to Westminster for what could actually be the trickiest part of this process, which is selling it to Parliament. We know so far that the DUP have been withholding their judgment. They've raised some concerns over the past week, but now they want to see the final legal text before they make their decision. Similar picture really amongst Brexiteer Tory MPs. They want to see the final thing before they deliver their judgment. Just one thing to throw into the mix though. A lot of Tories I've been chatting to who were last week preparing to man the barricades against this deal and say that they weren't convinced, they seem a bit more relaxed at the moment. Some seem to think that the PM's got a few more concessions than they thought. Be interesting to see if it's enough to win them over or even potentially to buy some silence.
Well, absolutely, Nick Eardley. In fact, we have reports of various Brexiteer Conservative MPs being called into number 10 Downing Street, no doubt being briefed certainly on the outline of what will be agreed. Thank you very much for now. Let's go to our Ireland correspondent in Belfast, Chris Page. Chris, what is the political problem in Northern Ireland that this deal is aiming to solve, and will it do it?
the deal, Joe, is really aiming to resolve, I suppose, the Democratic Unionist Party's objections to the protocol. The DUP have been blocking devolved governments here from fully functioning for more than a year. So the DUP say they will not allow the Stormont Executive, the power-sharing devolved government here, to be restored. They won't lift their veto unless what they see as an economic barrier with the rest of the UK is lifted and Northern Ireland's place in the UK is fully restored. Now, other parties, for example, the nationalist parties and the Cross Community Alliance Party, who broadly supported the protocol as a means of managing the fallout from Brexit, they would say the protocol hasn't damaged Northern Ireland's place in the UK at all. And in fact, it puts Northern Ireland at an economic advantage in that its businesses are in a unique position. They can sell their goods tariff-free into both the EU market and the UK market. So they will want to have their say in all this too, but nonetheless, the focus nationally and internationally, I should think, will be on the DUP's response to this deal. Something going on for the DUP specific to the politics of Northern Ireland also. On the 18th of May, there are council elections here. We find at election time in Northern Ireland, parties tend not to compromise as much. They tend to retreat to maybe more hardline positions. And in those elections, the DUP sees its main threat from a more hardline unionist party, the traditional unionist voice. So that is another factor in play.
Chris Page, thank you, there in Belfast. Now, Steve Baker, who is a Northern Ireland minister, who might not have been at the very centre of these particular set of negotiations, but was very much at the centre of the Brexit negotiations. Well, he's given an interview. Let's hear a short clip.
I can only say this, that the Prime Minister is on the cusp of securing a really fantastic result for everyone involved.
Well, that was short, as I said, but Steve Baker looks as if he is on board. You were a former Brexit Party candidate, Anaya. Do you think that means that the government, Rishi Sunak, is probably safe?
Well, I mean, I think that Rishi Sunak will feel very reassured if his people like Steve Baker are on board. And I think many Brexiteers have been worried that it would be watered down and essentially many concessions would be made to the European Union, that the heart of Brexit, taking back control, would be lost. So I do think that would be welcome. But I do think that Steve Baker is also just one perspective in the Brexit debate, so to speak, and we should not necessarily focus only on the hardline Brexiteers.
What message would you send to your colleagues, to those Eurosceptic Brexiteers who still have huge doubts? And we can show you this in the HuffPost, Laura. We are not stupid, Eurosceptic Tory MP Mark Francois warns Rishi Sunak. He is the chairman of the European Research Group of Conservative MPs and said they have to get rid of EU law in Northern Ireland. But they're not going to totally get rid of all EU laws guiding Northern Ireland, are they?
No, but there's going to be a tiny, partial, occasional role for the ECJ that will only be
European Court of Justice.
For the European Court of Justice that will only ignite in the rarest of circumstances. It's really interesting seeing Steve Baker's reaction because he was the chair of the ERG, as was Chris Heaton-Harris, who's the Northern Ireland Secretary. And I think it is true that you're seeing really important voices who historically have been quite embedded in the public's mind as hardline on Brexit, really seeing the value of this. And one of the things I'd like to just say for myself, I came in 2019, just at the end of all the Brexit wrangling. And it has felt to me sometimes like it has been more about characters in Westminster laying into each other than really delivering on the kind of the will of the British people, but in a way that is consistent with the interests of the British people. And I feel a huge weight of obligation. This is a good deal. It restores the integrity of the United Kingdom. It's good for Northern Ireland. And I hope that my colleagues will see it through that prism in the national interest rather than as a way of reigniting old rows.
Well, there's a lot to kind of agree with in there. I would say one of the reasons that we've had so many problems is that successive Conservative leaders have been unrealistic and dishonest, if you want, about the trade-offs that are required when dealing with an economic superpower like the European Union. And I think that's part of the problem. There are also purists in this debate who that even the smallest smattering of the European Court of Justice having any say over anything in terms of one single square millimetre of the British sovereign Isles is unacceptable, and clearly that view is in decline. I'm pleased to hear that, but I think we are here 6 years after the vote, we can blame those who didn't accept the outcome of that or wanted more democracy, whatever you want to call it. But the reality is it's been more of a political failure of those who pushed through Brexit and then told the British people that it could be done like this. Then we were told that it was oven ready. Then we were told it was oven ready, and now we're still in those negotiations. So there's been wrongdoing on all sides.
Yeah, I think what Clive demonstrates is still that there is a fundamental misunderstanding of what Brexit was. It wasn't just this kind of tick box exercise that was ready and done. It was a process of reinvigorating democracy, taking back control.
How does it reinvigorate democracy? Tell me.
Investing in post-industrial communities in the north of England that have been left behind for decades, who the majority of them voted for Brexit, the people that were previously the heart of the Labour Party. So if you have this kind of contemptuous, dismissive attitude, I think that that's a very sad demonstration that you have not learnt the lessons of Brexit.
It's not contemptuous, dismissive. I think one of the problems about having a vote like that on such a complex issue was that basically it's it was a narrow majority, and what should have happened, there should have been a considered and negotiated process through which to took that through. What happened was a very small majority then dictated what was going to happen next.
And an awful lot has happened since then. But Inaya, is there a question of being too pure, to use Clive's words, when it comes to the role of the EU in Northern Ireland? I mean, was it always unrealistic by you and people who supported the idea of Brexit, but not having a border on the island of Ireland? There had to be a border somewhere. There was always going to be some guidance of the EU.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think it was either that a no-deal Brexit, as was positioned, or not Brexit at all. But I think actually because there was so much uncertainty that it was even going to happen, and we ended up in this kind of binary polarised position of either or. And I actually think those years before it was implemented should have been, as a country, with the Labour Party, Lib Dems and Conservatives negotiating and winning the argument about what kind of Brexit we wanted as a society. And I think sometimes we ended up getting the worst of both worlds, which was either not leaving at all or just having a very difficult relationship with the European Union.
I mean, one of the big political issues is power sharing in Northern Ireland. I mean, do you think that is going to return? There are some who will say the DUP won't sign up to anything unless they get exactly the Brexit deal that they've wanted.
Yeah, I think there's a big bonus for them in staying well out of it. My hunch would be that they will neither endorse nor, formally disapprove of the deal. Because as your correspondent said, they're facing pressure from their own right flank, or whatever you want to call that. And the fact is that in the elections last year, Sinn Féin became the biggest party for the first time that has happened. And power sharing has always been on the assumption that the DUP would provide a First Minister and Sinn Féin would be a junior party. That is a huge, big question about how that works in future. So they've got a lot of other things going on here. The other big thing, of course, that's going on here is the B word, Boris Johnson, looming around in the background, complaining about the fact that he definitely would have negotiated it better. So once again, I do feel there is a bit of Brexit as Tory psychodrama happening here.
Right. Well, I mean, Boris Johnson also was the Prime Minister who put forward the protocol bill, which would have given the UK powers to unilaterally override parts of the protocol. Should that be dropped immediately now, Laura, if this deal is signed off today?
Well, the bill was justified at the time on the basis of the doctrine of necessity. That's rarely invoked, and there were people who didn't agree that that was a legitimate use of that doctrine. Certainly it was legally quite risky. It was politically, I think, a bit unattractive. And it seems to me that, I was looking back actually at things that Liz Truss said at the time. And last May, she said, our preference has always been a negotiated outcome. We continue to work towards that. That's exactly what the Prime Minister has achieved. And I actually think that if either of his predecessors were in the driving seat today, they would be lauding this as a victory too. And I hope that they will recognise it in truth for the significant national win that it is.
Do you see it as a national win? Keir Starmer has already said Labour will back the deal, will back Rishi Sunak's deal. Is that the right stance?
Well, I think so, because if there is a vote, I'll no doubt be going through the lobbies to vote for this. And I think it's a step in the right direction. It's about normalising our relationship with the EU again. And ensuring that we can maximise on our potential for economic trade with them, something which, the current situation isn't helping. We know we've lost 5.5% of GDP
right.
as a result of the current Brexit that we have. So something needs to change.
Right. Well, would that be closer alignment with the EU? Labour win the next election. They don't want to talk about Brexit. Would it be closer alignment for the whole of the UK, not just for Northern Ireland as it currently stands?
So I think if you're going to... We've obviously committed to sector-by-sector deals, so a kind of Swiss-style approach to negotiations with the EU on those trading alignments. We always want to see regulations and standards increase. When I say regulations and standards increase, I mean we want to see convergence with very high standards on food and various other electrical goods and so on in the EU. And I think it's a race to the top, not a race to the bottom. So we don't have a problem with that in our party. It's when you want deregulation, when you want to do what Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz Truss did, which was a bonfire of regulations. I think that's where you have problems. We're quite happy dealing with the EU and the standards that they have.
Well, let's stick with Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, because he's given a speech this morning talking about growth, his mission to improve the lives of families across the country. He says, judge him after 5 years of a Labour government. Let's listen to a bit more of it.
Here in this document, the mission: secure the highest sustained growth in the G7, a measurable goal, an invitation for the British people to judge us on whether they feel better off after 5 years of a Labour government, but also the building blocks of a clear strategy, the first steps of a credible long-term plan, a plan which represents the determination of my party to create more wealth, lead Britain out of its low-wage, high-tax doom loop.
Do you agree that taxes are too high, Clive? Should Labour be cutting them into the next election?
Depends on what kind of taxes you're talking about. So I think if you're talking about the vast majority of people in this country and their income tax, then possibly not.
But isn't that what he's talking about?
Well, one of the things he said there was that growth and the proceeds of growth, which is, I have issue with that terminology, but we can come back to that maybe. But in terms of the proceeds of growth, that those at the bottom, who are the generators of much of that growth, aren't receiving their fair share. So one of the things that you would like, I think we can then talk off the back of that, is the fact that if we want to see people get their fair share of the growth that they help produce, then you should have wealth taxes, because we know that wealth at the moment isn't taxed at the levels that it should be.
But
it's not taxed anywhere near where income is.
There isn't a plan, is there, for Keir Starmer for the Labour Party? But you'd like to see that.
It follows on from that. If you think that you want to create an economy where those at the bottom receive the benefits of that growth, then...
Should Keir Starmer be listening more to Clive Lewis?
Well, I think you should always be listening to Clive Lewis. That should indeed your viewers. Oh, yeah, that's
not a controversial statement, yes.
Statement. I think he's got a problem, though, which is about the fact that his original 10 pledges when he came in, one of them was about higher taxes on higher earners going up.
Yes.
We don't yet know quite what the destination of that pledge is. In the same way, we don't know the destination of some of the other pledges, for example, tuition fees being scrapped, which is now under review. And there is a kind of issue which I think Keir Starmer has benefited from having a long apprenticeship through COVID when no one was particularly interested in anything he said. And he's dragged the party into a particular direction, which has usually been towards the centre. So I think there probably are voices like Clive's that he will be facing now as a kind of counterweight to the direction he's currently been taking.
And is that a good? Well, is that a good thing?
Well, I struggle with this. I read a Substack piece saying, look, Keir Starmer is incredibly ruthless, and part of me incredibly admires it. He wants to be Prime Minister. Frankly, people in the Labour Party need to have a bit more ambition and hunger for power. But at the same time, he has tossed a lot of things overboard in the pursuit of that, including, let's be honest, his Remain stance, which pretty much won him that leadership election and now has been buried in a very deep grave.
Well, it's a challenge for you, though, isn't it, Laura, and the Conservatives? If Keir Starmer wants a low-tax, high-growth economy, there's nowhere for you to go.
Well, the only thing that I would observe in my 3 years as a backbencher is that I have never been into a political debate in Parliament where the rallying cry from the other side has not been for higher spending on whatever the particular issue is. I've never, ever heard any Labour politician talk about a leaner state, better efficiency. In fact, it took Tony Blair writing an op-ed in conjunction with William Hague last week to talk about harnessing the power of the digital revolution to make public services work better. You never hear that from the Labour front bench. So although these words are kind of being churned out, about growth and low tax and all the rest, I do think in a way he's sort of focus grouped them and he's worked out what he thinks the people want to hear to find Labour not scary, not too Marxist, not too reminiscent of Jeremy Corbyn, and to give them a chance. But I don't see it reflected in his backbench. I don't see it in the parliamentary debates, and I don't see that in the way they present themselves in Parliament.
I think everyone's going to want to disagree with you, but I think actually one of the most interesting things that Keir Starmer has done, particularly in the last year, is healed the breach with the Blair years. You saw Rachel Reeves writing in the Times this morning saying if we'd had this kind of sustained growth we had during the Blair years, that had carried on through the 2010s, we would now be much richer. The fact is that now it is no longer a dirty word to talk about Labour's last time in power, and that has been incredibly important, I think, about the way they presented themselves. You ended up with 5 pledges last week. So those of us who are old enough can remember the pledge card from 1997. Now sort of redone in a much more nebulous, vague way, but it's kind of existing again. The same thing happened when, in 1997, Labour wanted to go in saying we'll keep to the spending envelope of the Tories. And so I think you have to see this all as following a particular playbook about what does it mean to look like we're getting ready for power.
Well, but the thing that's interesting is that the last time that was done successfully in the Labour Party's history, it was Tony Blair, and he branded them as so close to the Conservatives, you know, with Peter Mandelson saying things like we're intensely relaxed about people becoming filthy rich and the party of business.
As long as they pay their taxes.
And it's only where
they
cleave very close to the Conservative Party, and I think that does create an existential question for people in, you know, Clive's position politically.
I want to speak, but I'm aware you haven't spoken at all yet.
I just wanted to say that one thing that's been missing, both from the 5 pledges and this speech, is a conversation about immigration. We have an economic model that relies on the continual bringing in people, low skill, low pay, and that brings competition for jobs and has contributed to Brexit, as we just talked about, and a sense of dissatisfaction and lack of control in the way that our economy is working and functioning. So I do think there are still big issues that Labour Party are still avoiding.
I think it did come up in the questions at the end, and it was dealt with by Keir Starmer. I think I understand that, you know, it would be lovely if you could portray this as more Marx, but it's more Mariana Mazzucato than Marx. It's about mission-led statements about the intervention of state working with markets to better further the economy, something which, you know, has been written about to a great deal.
And do you not need higher taxes for that in order to fund those sorts of public services?
But taxes are an integral part of the economy, not just to spend, but also to stabilise the economy, you know, that macroeconomic stability. So, you know, fiscal policy is a part and parcel of any future Labour government's, you know, economic policies. But the key thing here for me is the difference between 1997 and 2024, when I presume the general election will be, is the state of the British economy. We're not going to go into that. We're in a perma crisis. We've got institutional collapse and failure happening all around us. So the next Labour government, I think Keir Starmer's right to actually focus on rebuilding, putting down new roots, a new base, and rebuilding the British economy in a far more progressive way than it has done for the last 50 years. I know that a lot of people in my party will find criticism in here. I can. But I would give my right arm for this kind of stuff that was, if it had been coming out in Ed Miliband's time. So, you know, this is some of this stuff we should welcome and embrace.
Is radicalism then in the Labour Party dead?
I don't think it is, because one of the most radical things that Keir Starmer could do, he gestured towards, is the idea of changing planning rules. Now, property owners tend to be older, tend to be wealthier, they tend to vote Conservative because of their demographics. But every problem in Britain you can, to some extent, trace back to incredibly high house prices. And the fact we have a generation of people who all our pension contribution ideas are based on the idea that most people will own their homes by the time they retire. Now, for my generation, that's not really necessarily true. For generations below me, even less likely to be true. And frankly, you know, people are not having enough children, we say, you know, all of these kind of things. Well, actually, it's because they can't have a stable life and a family and an idea of somewhere that they can live. And if you look at the way of the Red Wall, one of the things that was interesting about why they've perhaps flipped Tory is those were constituencies where you could still have, you know, your Barratt home and your two cars in the driveway. You know, you could have an idea of a stable life. And frankly, that, as Clive says, is now retreating further away as people really feel the pinch.
Do you think democracy should have been one of these 5 missions, though? Because I think, given the Brown report, I was surprised that renewal of democracy wasn't in there.
I think Labour Party in favour of democracy is probably... you'd like to take that one on trust.
Renewal of democracy, not in favour of democracy, renewal of democracy, in terms of the democratic structures and institutions which have been corroded.
But Inea's right in the sense that actually that's probably not something the Labour Party wants to talk about. If you look at, for example, the people's vote and the campaign to overturn Brexit, that is a very sticky situation for the Labour Party right now.
I just want
I
want to play a bit of Bernie Sanders. You remember him, he's the senator from Vermont, left-wing, supporter of Jeremy Corbyn when he was leader. He was interviewed on Sky News yesterday. Let's have a listen.
The way real change always takes place is when millions of people demand it, and then suddenly you have presidents or prime ministers say, I think that's a good idea, because they know that millions of people want it. At the end of the day, what struggle is about is working class people standing up and demanding justice. And the people on top will respond to that.
Do you think that perhaps politicians from the centre, I guess some would say more kind of compromising politicians, Joe Biden, perhaps Keir Starmer over here in the UK, they need to be a bit more radical?
Yes.
You do? You'd like them to read your book and to come up with a few of those ideas, take them on board, right?
Got it.
So you do agree with Bernie Sanders? He said yes. It should
Well, he
be more
hadn't
radical.
obviously heard the speech, so. But the theory.
All right, you had time to
but
think
the
about
theory
that.
of change. Of course, you want a theory of change, and yes, politicians of the centre will be influenced by what the public and what people.
But in the end, centrist policies, it seems, as it was put to Bernie Sanders, is what wins elections.
It seems, I mean, that's been the case in this country in my lifetime, if I'm honest. But, you know, I think one of the things that, because I think Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyn got kind of lumped in together because they were both in the ascendancy during the same period of time. But actually, I think Bernie Sanders got much closer to the Democratic nomination than people sort of truly appreciate. And I remember sort of being in the States at around that time, and people were telling me during the primary season that they would meet people who were interchangeably saying that they would like to see running for the presidency either Bernie Sanders, this was the second time, either Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump, because both of them had a way, although completely different politically, of appealing to something, you know, certain voters in America. And so maybe there's a room for radicalism.
I would push back that centrist policies win the day. Boris Johnson, whether you agree with them or not, he won an 80-seat majority on the promise that he would level up, you know, and set a whole new agenda when it comes to Brexit and so on, as we've been discussing. And I think that, as has been mentioned, that the challenges that Britain face, the cost of living crisis, the fact that living standards are not only stagnating, they're going backwards. And we have a generation in this country for the first time that are going to be worse off than their parents for the first time in a century. This is huge. And I think morale amongst the British people is incredibly low. And therefore, I do think radicalism is what we need.
Describe Boris Johnson as a centrist. He's one of the most...
No, I'm a saying he's a radical.
Oh, right, okay, sorry, I was going to say, whoa.
I think he's doing radical
I've gone down a rabbit hole here, sorry.
Is Laura right that actually centrist policies and governments tend to win the day over, I mean, historically?
No, but I do think that you go through political cycles, and I think we went through, with Brexit, there was a feeling that something needed to be smashed, and that's an energy that was captured very eloquently by that campaign. However, now standing in the ruins of the smashed thing, I think a lot of people are like, oh, perhaps we could have a period where politics is quite boring, and it's just rebuilt, and we don't try and kind of...
But do you think the public are passionate about Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer's boring centrism?
No, but I also think that sometimes it's better not to be incredibly passionate about politics. You know, May
Yeah, and I do think actually there is a moment actually when people do not want politicians poking their nose into their lives. They just want things to be well run. They want to see things being executed. Like, for example, today's deal on the protocol, just low fuss, being presented, getting through Parliament, and moving the country forward.
Shifts, though, doesn't it? It's not a set piece. It's not set in the middle. I mean, to think about politicians talking about the climate crisis, decarbonisation, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, would have been unheard of, and yet they are now. So things move and shift.
All right, let's talk about this interview that Idris Elba, the actor, gave to Esquire magazine earlier this month, in which he said, as humans, we are obsessed with race, and that obsession can really hinder people's aspirations, hinder people's growth. Racism is very real, but from my perspective, it's only as powerful as you allow it to be. I stopped describing myself as a black actor when I realised it put me in a box. Now, this has proved controversial, unsurprisingly, for many people, but Anaya actually wrote in response in Spiked saying what Idris Elba gets right about race. What is it that he gets right?
Well, actually, that a lot of black people and ethnic minority people don't define themselves by their racial identity, don't think that their race is the biggest barrier to them achieving in life, and are actually worried about certain narratives that see race as the only way in which we should engage with the world, relate to one another, and see ourselves. And actually that is becoming a new form of a burden, a new form of kind of racial anxiety, and some people might even say oppression, that your race is now becoming a singular viewpoint. And, you know, I created the Equiano Project in 2020 in response to the Black Lives Matter movement, which said that racism was embedded in society and we should import a very American-centric narrative when it comes to race. And I think we're seeing people like Idris Elba and many other black and ethnic minority people question that and want a much wider debate that promises free speech, that accepts there's a diversity of opinion, and actually not all racial disparities equal racism.
Clive?
Why are you coming to me next?
Well, is racism embedded in our society?
So I think, look, I've looked at the website, and I think there's some common agreement. The first thing is to accept that racism is a construct from the 19th century, which basically says that races are categorised into how much suffering they can take. Structural racism exists. It's real. It's been around for 400 years, a justifying ideology. We can argue about that. The government tried to argue about that with their race report. That's now in the trash bin of history.
That's
it's
not
gone.
true.
Well,
That's
it
not
is.
true.
It's been discarded.
And actually,
so if I could just finish my point.
Well,
finish the point. And so I think the key thing here is there is one race, it's the human race. And that's where I think all of us around this table want to get to. But the reality is, structural racism is a reality in many people's lives. Now, do I think it's the main reality in their life? No, I think it's class. But that's what intersectionality is about. It's about accepting that there is a intersection between class and race and sex and disability that have an impact on how you exist within this society. Now, I'm not obsessing about race. I don't obsess about race. I would obsess more about class, actually.
Right, but you
it's
are
important and it's a critical part of the analysis.
Yeah, I mean, you are clear that it is structural in that sense, that it is embedded in society.
Well, no, I don't agree that racism is embedded
I'm sort of saying that's what
and this is the thing, that's a particular viewpoint. And actually, there are many ethnic minority people. And you mentioned the government's race report headed by Tony Sewell, which Clive compared to the KKK. I mean, that's the kind of discourse that I think polarises the debate and actually shuts down a lot of viewpoints. But that represented a view that said, actually, a lot of these things that we've been assuming were about racism might be about class, might be about family structure.
Or poverty.
And all of those different issues. And we often cloud those complex conversations by going to
this
race.
This is the thing I'm struggling with. If you go to an organisation, often vilified, like I work very closely with the Runnymede Trust, for example, they clearly understand that racism is just simply one component in a series of issues, or structural issues, which will affect many of the communities that they work towards. Now, look, we can talk about lots of different issues here, but racism, let's talk about stop and search. These are real issues that happen, not just because of your class, but also because of your race. Now, I'm not in denial of that, but yes, do I understand that race is a component in a complex picture? Yes. But to deny that it's actually there, deny that it's structural, is, I think, problematic.
No one denies that it's there, but it's actually the emphasis in terms of when we look at a range of factors. So actually, even when you mention stop and search, what's very interesting, according to the polls, the overwhelming majority of black and ethnic minority people believe that the police is a force for good. And you wouldn't really hear that narrative. You often hear a very pessimistic one. But actually, there's an optimistic story to be told.
Isn't it about the statistics as to why so many more black and ethnic minority people are stopped and searched by the police? Or recently, the charity Inquest published a report claiming that black people are 7 times more likely to die than white people when restraint was involved. We can see it here in the Guardian headline. How do you explain those disparities unless racism
Well, actually, it's quite interesting with that report, which I did read. It kind of overlooks the fact that actually a very difficult conversation. Black males, for example, in London, 61% of violent crimes are committed by black males. Now, that does shape many of the statistics. Now, that might make you uncomfortable, but as someone that cares about not having young people dying in violent ways and being drawn into crime, and the fact that black communities are disproportionately impacted by crime, I want to have a very honest conversation than knee-jerk going to racism. What are the other factors?
Well, we've had some of the conversation about these issues. I mean, Helen and Laura, it's about then the solutions that are put forward. I mean, the Sewell report, yes, there was a huge controversy over the results of the Sewell report that said there wasn't systemic structural racism, that there were other factors like class and like poverty. How does that then shape the reaction and the response by government, let's say, in this particular example, to trying to do something about it?
So one of the big conversations the last couple of years has been the difference between equality and equity, and basically the idea of should you treat everybody the same, or should you give specific help to some people to push them up, as if, kind of a handicapping system. And one of the difficulties I really feel with that is that it provokes a real backlash. People feel with things like affirmative action, why are you getting help and I'm not? So I think the way that this conversation has evolved is really about universal help, targeted particularly at people at the bottom, and that will disproportionately help black and minority ethnic Britons who are more likely to be in poverty. But it is not being framed as racial help, for example, which then provokes a backlash. So in policy terms, the solutions are to try and get everybody on a level playing field, because instinctively people feel that's fair. Everyone should get a fair crack. That's the way politicians should talk about it.
I mean, what do you think, Laura, in terms of the policy response, and also terms that are used a lot in society, unconscious bias? bias, for example.
Yeah. So just on the policy response, one of the things I think that is really interesting, and Anira, I looked at your the Equinire project and I saw you had some really, really interesting voices there. Something about, for example, the head teacher talking about the poverty of low expectations and certain children almost being patronised as if they had to do a lower quality of education because it would be easier for them to access rather than learning about Stormzy but not Mozart. And then how they were meant to advance in the same way. And I thought, so the poverty of low expectation, I thought that was one sort of pernicious wrong that was identified. The other thing that was identified, I think in the Sewell report, but I've read it elsewhere, is about actually recognising that quite apart from race, there's a real difference as a child where you grow up. So, for example, state schools, particularly state primary schools in London, have overwhelmingly high academic achievement. You could go to a rural place, parts of Cornwall, or where there are all very, very different academic outcomes for kids, and yet we sometimes use race as a way of saying, well, this is happening here, and not recognising that there's much better resourcing that's being ploughed into cities rather than more rural parts, and not really looking about where there are opportunities geographically located. So I think sometimes if we're being really honest about how we design policy, we have to look in areas where the public focus sort of isn't as keenly felt in one spot rather than another.
I think universalism, as Helen's pointed out there, is key. I'm putting through a private members bill on a universal dividend for energy, for everyone, from renewable energy. And we know that disproportionately that will impact the poorest communities, in particular black people who are disproportionately amongst those in fuel poverty. So a universal benefit will benefit everyone, but also will target those at the bottom to ensure they get it. But there's obviously been a big sea change over the last 40 or 50 years against universalism. So clearly we can see that there are ways to approach this. I personally feel that class is I agree that class is a massive part. But where I disagree is the notion that so you gave the example of teachers. I was at school. I asked to do A-levels. My careers teacher, from a very different generation, told me that it'd be possibly too demanding for me to do. My dad came down to the school, had a massive head fit at the school. I was able to do A-levels. Now, you can see that in two ways. One, that there was a teacher who lowered my expectations, who may have seen me in a way that meant that I couldn't do this because I wasn't capable of doing it, partly racism. Or you could see it as a success story of the school that let me go on to do that. You can see it in two ways, but both are real. Both exist side by side.
All right, it's a good point to leave the conversation. Thank you, Clive. We're going to talk about Betty Boothroyd because the sad news that the first female Speaker of the House of Commons has died at the age of 93. She was a huge character. She stood no nonsense when she was Speaker, presiding over everything going on in the House of Commons. I interviewed her several years ago. Let's have a listen. You'd reached your ambition by becoming a Member of Parliament and you were involved at sort of committee levels. How did you go from that to becoming Speaker?
Bossiness, I suppose, or people keeping in control. All I can say is the inevitability of gradualness. Then they wanted a Deputy Speaker and I got that. Well, isn't this great? It was wonderful. And I remember going into the chair for the first time as Deputy Speaker, and Jack Weatherall, who was Speaker then, he said, come on, give her a chair. Well, nobody'd give me a chair. And somebody was making a speech, Peter Pike, a member for Burnley, many years ago. And he looked up, and there I was, and he said, oh, what do we call you? And I stood on my 5'4" or whatever I was then, and I said, call me Madam. And they did. And then, of course, to be Speaker, I just felt then, go for gold. If you can do the Deputy, you can do the Speaker's job.
She commanded enormous respect and affection. There we can see her, the Speaker's procession, going into the House of Commons. Neither of you two, of course, were MPs at the time, but you'll no doubt remember her.
Well, she's not the first Speaker of my lifetime, but she is the first Speaker that I remember in my life. And, I mean, it's hard to put into words when you're an MP how important the role of the Speaker is. It's their chamber, it is their forum. And she brought a poise and a kind of elegance to it that I think is irreplaceable.
Clive?
And she was a fantastic woman and someone who clearly made a massive impact on politics, on the way that we see women's role in politics. And she drove a trailblazer, if you want, for so many women that have come afterwards as well.
Helen?
I just think that generation of women are so fascinating. They had to be so tough in order to succeed.
Yeah.
And you've seen her and Margaret Thatcher and Barbara Castle, that kind of iron femininity, right? The hair is set, it does not move, and she tells you what to do. And I think that is a fascinating generation, which I'm sad that we've now lost another representative of.
I completely agree, especially, you know, I think as a younger woman, I think that people like her are amazing role models, so it's great to see.
And we'll have more, of course, on the Northern Ireland deal tomorrow. But that's all for today. I will be back with more Politics Live tomorrow at 12:15 here on BBC Two and on the BBC iPlayer. Thank you to all of my guests for joining me here today. Bye-bye.
What a great show. We had some Brexit shenanigans. Fucking Brexit. God damn it. Fucking Brexit. Oh, do I have to do a rant about Brexit? I fucking hope not. No. Let's just focus on me, because it's about me, innit? I am King Stizor of Scousland, and I shall invade Wales first, the North Wales, so we can go to the beach, because Blackpool's shite, and it's cold. Bit like Wales, but it's another country, so it sounds better. And then I shall invade the rest of the reprobates in the Englands. Oh my days. Yeah, I'm going to agree with Clive Lewis, getting a little bit serious here. I think, honestly, classism is way fucking worse than racism. Because it affects way more people. It just does. Like, you can be any fucking colour and still be a broke-ass, whatever word, innit? Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, does racism exist? Yes. You get stupid humans. We all fucking know that. I mean, Jesus Christ, have you seen fucking YouTube or TikTok? There's plenty of stupid fucking people on the internet. You don't need a fucking, like, a degree to make that shit out. But in terms of the economic situation that most people actually in the West find themselves is pretty shit. Like, if you look at how rich people are compared to how poor people are, it's worse than, like, the medieval times. Like, you can't make it up. There's more billionaires than you can fucking count. And I can't even count to a billion, to be fair. 1, can't be asked. 2, can't be asked. So, what are you doing with all your money? It's just sat in a bank. Okay, great. There should be, like, some stupid tax, you know, that says, like, okay, look, as a human being, the resources of the planet are finite, right? And money is anything, right, with intrinsic value. So, we're going to treat money as a resource instead of a means of exchange. I think that's what needs to happen. I think we need to educate people that money is an actual commodity. I mean, we do trade it on the fucking stock market every fucking day. We trade currency all the time. So why not just say, look, if you've got so much fucking money, you're literally incapable of fucking spending it, which most rich people are, because you can only buy so many fridges or washing machines or a pair of jeans. What's the rest of your money fucking doing at this point? Fuck all. Give me a here. I'm going to give it to some tramp on the streets to get a job. And then he's going to pay taxes. There you go. And you will still be stupidly fucking rich. You are not going to go poor if I take away some of your stupid amounts of fucking money that you've accumulated. I'm not saying that you're not entitled to accumulate it, but what I'm saying is, when you reach the end game of Monopoly, I think we should start a new game of Monopoly. Or Monopoly gets very boring very fucking quickly. When you own everything, that's not a free market anymore. Monopoly is based on capitalism. Have you ever played fucking Monopoly? Anybody? I mean, I have. Doesn't work out too well when you're fucking landing on fucking Skid Row every 5 seconds with some twat saying, give me 50 fucking quid because I've got a hotel. It's like, god damn it. You end up buying the fucking waterworks or some shite. Get the point. Capitalism is monopoly. And the people who are playing the game of capitalism, they fucking own everything already, is the point. And we are getting shafted by the people who fucking own everything. I think the banker, whoever the banker is, I've got no idea in this mad ramble. But whoever the bank is, seriously, fucking start a new game of Monopoly, because this one's dead already. Everyone can tell it's fucking dead. You got people literally going on strike all across the planet, basically, saying we want more money. And then they go, well, it's inflation, as if, like, we didn't make it. They just literally don't give a fuck. They invented money and then tell you that the money is a thing. It's like, it's in the fucking Bible. No, it's not, you twat. Well, I mean, it is, but it isn't, if you know what I mean. It's not like some fucking commandment. It's not like gravity. Like, jump up and down. See, that's objectively true. Money isn't objectively true. It's not. It's a construct of humans. And the only reason why we use money is because we're individuals, right? We need to trade with each other. Okay. Fine. But doesn't mean it's actually a fucking law of physics, you twat. They can print as much money as they fucking want. Literally. You see them do it all the time. Billions for Ukraine, billions for this, billions for that. And why the fucking nurses going to fucking food banks then? If you got all these billions hidden away like a squirrel, you twat. What happened to all the money that we give to the banks? Where did all that money go? Oh, I didn't get a penny of it back. What happened to all the money when they sold the post office? Where did that money go? It went to the treasury. Oh wow, fuck me. Did I get a tax? Did I get any tax rebate from that? No. I mean, I fucking owned it as a taxpayer, right? I mean, this is the funny thing about fucking public services as well. They say it's a public service. No, it's owned by the fucking public, you twat. That's why it's called a public service. We pay for it in tax. What gives you the right to sell it? I'm just asking. Did you ask my permission to sell the fucking post office? No, didn't think so, you twat. But just the Tories yourself fucking everything like Margaret Thatcher. Dozy bitch. This country is fucked because of Tories. People like her. Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher. Fucking horrible, useless economic fucking muppets. That's what they were. Like, if you compare Liz Truss to the only other Prime Minister we've ever had, I'll tell you who it is. Margaret fucking Thatcher. That's exactly who she is. She tried to do a Margaret Thatcher, and the fucking free market, which is not free, said, are you having a fucking laugh? Even the rich people were like, that's a stupid fucking idea. Hold on. You want us to borrow you money so you can give us it back? That's what literally Liz Truss did. She said, I'm going to borrow fuck tons of money and give it back in tax cuts. And the rich went, nah, we like bonds and yields, thank you very much. And your country is in the fucking dustbin. I don't think you can even pay us back, even if we give you lots of money, you ain't paying it back because you're fucking dumb. And they are fucking dumb. Do you know why? You can track the fucking record of the Tories for 13 years. Fucking dumb. The country is in the shittest state I've ever seen it. Ever. Like, for real. I mean, you can go, the manners went on strike under Margaret Thatcher. Yeah, at least you'd get a fucking doctor though, couldn't you? Just saying. At least you could get a fucking doctor. I mean, Margaret Thatcher is like a twat. I used to put Margaret Thatcher on a bonfire as a child. You do know that, right? That's how much I couldn't stand that bitch, and most people couldn't. Poll tax, etc., etc. But to think that people forget that the same fucking idiots who love Margaret Thatcher are literally the same twats who are in power right now, and you wonder why the country is a fucking arse cake. It's just like people forget the Tories are fucking mental. Neoliberalism is fucking mental. Remember the good old days when they used to talk about globalization? The same fucking people who made Brexit were the same fucking ass clowns who said it was a good idea to have fucking free movements of people. Yeah, how's that working out for most countries? Not very fucking well, is it? You know why? Because they don't give a fuck about cohesion of communities. They don't care about people's actual pride in their fucking country or anything. They just think, oh, give me some money. Give me some fucking money. Free movements of people is the free movement of cheap fucking labour. That's all it's ever been. Like, literally. And people go like, why would you vote for Brexit? I don't know. Maybe because it's a bad fucking idea. In general, it's a bad idea. Like, I don't mind trading with people and shit, but I mean, free movements of people, that's just like a fucking give me to all the big, massive corporations. It's got nothing to do about being European at that point. This is talking about pure cash terms. Like, are you fucking kidding me? So, let's import people from other countries to do jobs that you can't be asked to train them for. Well, we can easily solve that problem. Slash the fucking education budget and then just import people. That's exactly what's happened to our country. We don't train anybody to do fucking anything anymore. We just import twats. That's it. I mean, importing twats is normally good, but not on a mass scale of like retardedness. It makes no fucking sense. First of all, you get people who get fucking pretty angry pretty fucking quickly, as demonstrated in Knowsley, which is not one of the nicest places up north to fucking live anyway. Poor fucking bastards. I mean, I live literally in Liverpool. I would never venture to Knowsley, so fuck knows who fucking sent them there. Stupid twats. I don't. Here's a bright idea. Let's send a bunch of fucking people who are black, technically speaking, to a racist. It's a fucking Knowsley. Fucking Knowsley. Are you having a fucking laugh? What twat thought that was a good idea? Do not know. But it was fucking hilarious to find it on the news. Thinking, yeah, as if that's a shock. Anyway, let's hope and pray that we get a Labour government in the next election, because I'm seriously fucking done with the Tories. I mean, I was done with the Tories when the Lib Dems thought it was a fucking funny idea to put them in power in the first place. Alarm bells were ringing for me. As soon as that happened, I was like, hang on a minute. All my life, the Lib Dems have been on the left. All my life, growing up as a kid. Lib Dems, free the weed, you know, hippies, whatever. Tories with a smile. Rest in peace, Angel. She'd fucking hate me for telling that joke, actually. Anyway. All my life I thought, oh, you know, whatever. And then this mad cunt called Nick Clegg shows up. I'm like, oh, okay. Okay. And then he's like, oh, fuck Gordon Brown. We're going to get him better to Tory. I was like, we're doomed. As soon as they did that, I knew the country was fucked. I was like, oh, great. We're done. Fucking done. And then the Tories had this fucking amazing idea. I've said this loads of times. Let's have a referendum on fucking the EU. Hang on, I'm sure Tony Blair tried that one and quickly got rid of it in his election manifesto. Because if anybody remembers growing up in this fucking country anyway, Tony Blair promised the British people one important thing that a lot of people forget. A referendum on the EU. And it quickly disappeared. Because you know why? Because someone in his fucking office said, that's the stupidest fucking idea I've ever heard in my fucking life. Don't do it. Because you know what the British people are going to do, don't you? Fucking vote to leave. Have you read our right-wing newspapers lately? Have you? Are you shitting me? What clown would ever think the British public would ever vote to stay in the EU? You would have to be a fucking moron to think that, honestly, or you live on another planet. I'm not too sure. Well, I mean, you'd have to live on another planet to get that catastrophe fucking wrong. And I should know, I voted to leave. I had a conversation with someone in a taxi once. I knew the guy who was just working as taxis and that. And he said, so what do you think about all this, like, Brexit shit? I was like, I'm voting to leave. And he was like, why? So, well, think about it, right? All the shit that you see in Liverpool is funded by the EU, which is basically taxpayers' money going to the EU for the EU to siphon off for all these mad MPs in the EU and then give me my money back, which the government should be spending anyway. So, why? Why am I fucking asked about that? I should be asked, right? I should be asked about that, but you're telling me that's okay. Every time I see an EU flag, I just think that's a failure of my own government. Literally, failure. The fact that you can be proud that the EU's giving you back your own fucking money that you pay in tax is pretty fucking impressive. Like, literally. That's like the Tories when they told you, We've got 10,000 more cops. What do you mean from the 20,000 you slashed in 2010? Do you mean them ones? Like, am I supposed to clap at that fucking stupid shit? Like, seriously, am I supposed to clap that we've got less doctors, less nurses, less GPs, less fucking everything, basically, under the Tories, and then I'm supposed to clap when they give me something back that they fucked in the first place? We've got our own currency. It's called a quid. Just so you know. That's for the chat boxes. It's called a quid. That's a Scouse word, by the way. Just so you know. Fucking thieves. Get off my language, twats. Anywho. I hope the Northern Ireland deal thing works out, though, because I'm sick of fucking listening to Brexit. It's a pain in the fucking ass. Because everyone just thinks it's literally about, like, people and the EU, and it's not. Like, if you actually look why the EU was started in terms of its political arm, not... Okay, little history lesson for you people. Right, after World War II, the United States basically rebuilt Europe. And then the French got pissy about it. And decided, well, not just the French, and some Germans, decided the biggest economic threat was the United States in terms of people, right? Because the United States at that time, and still is a hyperpower, not a superpower, it's a hyperpower, decided, well, let's do this weird thing called trading blocks, right? Yeah, because they wanted to rival the United States as a country in terms of capita. It's got more people in it, but it was... It's a bit mad. Anyway, point being is, so the EU was devised to rival the United States. Now, it started off well because everyone wanted to trade, and it was doing pretty well. And then you had a bunch of Nazis take over and fascists, and this is actually true. This is not even a fucking lie. A bunch of fascists took over the fucking idea, and I was like, let's go one further and literally make Europe a country with a flag and a national anthem. And the British were like, whoa, that's a bit Hitlerish, that, you know what I mean? A bit Hitlerish. I've read firsthand how Hitler got into power, and he didn't invade Germany, did he? I'm just saying. And if you know anything about fascists, they always come with a smile. Always. Like Mussolini. Fascists always have a smile. Oh, it's good for you. Trust me. Yeah, fuck that. Fuck that, as they say. So I voted to leave the EU, not because I'm anti-European or I hate Europeans. It's because these conniving little bastards, which they are, I'm fucking telling you they are, because they fucking are, will tell you spin you a yarn and tell you that you're anti-European, when actually I'm anti-fascists. And the EU is a big, massive fascist ball of fucking donkey shit. Basically. That's why I voted to leave. It's like, it's staring you in the face. Well, you know, World War II. What? No. I read World War II. It's got nothing to do with the fucking EU in its current state of affairs. Besides, what's the EU doing now when it comes to Ukraine? Fuck all. Nothing. Who's the biggest contributor in the EU to Ukraine's defense? The United Kingdom. I wonder why that is. Well, because Germany hasn't got a fucking army. The French are crap. Basically. And the only other country, apart from France, in the EU with nuclear weapons is us. Basically. Like, literally. I mean, you can't make this shit up. If Putin ever decides to go full fucking batshit crazy and launch some nuclear weapons, guess where them nuclear weapons are going to fall first? It definitely won't be fucking France, mate. Or Germany. Or any other Baltic fucking country for that matter. It's going to be on his prime target. Fucking Great Britain. Payback time, innit? Like, literally. We are so fucked. Some real fucking hell. Like, I feel like it's the end of days or some shit when I watch political programs, because a lot of people on here are fucking dumb that I listen to in terms of, like, politicians. I mean, some of them make sense sometimes, but on average, most of them are fucking useless twats. It reminds me of being in school, you know, and you got all these little nerdy little fucking kids around you, and they're just annoying. Like, they grow up to be politicians. It's like, why the fuck am I getting, like, I'm literally, they've got no common sense, is what I'm trying to say. No, like, being street smart's not the same as being, like, degreed up your ass kind of thing. Like, these politicians are just mad. But the Clive Lewis things, going back to that, is stupidly correct. Literally, classism is worse than racism. It just is. And a lot of people forget that we had class wars in the 80s about these rich bastards taking the piss. And now it's fine because everyone got fucking drunk in the 90s apparently. And then woke up in the 2020s and are like, what happened? Yeah, you got drunk on capitalism in the 90s. That's what fucking happened. Then got ripped off by the banks. And then fucking COVID. And Russia decides over fucking marriage made in hell. Shit, Putin must be a dozy bastard though, innit? Imagine Putin sitting there thinking, the world's just had the most weirdest crisis ever with mad COVID shit. I've got an idea. Let's go to war with fucking Ukraine. Just to make it even more fucking stupid. Can't win, can you? These fucking people are crazy. To be fair on the Russians though, they didn't fucking elect them, did they? To be honest. I mean, I didn't fucking elect Liz Truss. Look what damage she fucking did. I'm surprised no one even cares. Or like shouts, like every time I hear a Tory, I just want to say, do you know who used to be Prime Minister? Liz Truss. I will never forget that was our most retarded Prime Minister in living memory. In fact, in the history books. Is there a worse Prime Minister than Liz Truss, anybody? Is there? She literally killed the British economy in a fucking mini budget. In a mini budget, not even a fucking actual budget. It was a mini budget. She fucking murdered the economy. Stabbed it to death. Boom. There we go. With my economics. Are you fucking kidding me? Economics. That don't exist no more. Don't exist. I mean, fucking hell. I mean, you mightn't like the guy, Elon Musk. He's literally told people, bro, universal income is a requirement. Imagine not paying attention to a guy that throws rockets into space and brings them back. Imagine not paying attention to someone that smart who literally changed the entire car industry by himself. He didn't invent PayPal, but him and his mates did, right? This guy is not stupid. And if that guy is telling you it's a fucking requirement, I suppose you should pay attention. Well, where's all the money coming from? Well, you fucking print it from thin air. Where does it come from anyway, you twat? This is another thing that annoys me. People don't understand that we print money from thin air anyway. The Bank of England is the nation's credit card. We do understand that, right? I hope. So when you hear the BBC say, well, the government's got to pull itself up by its bootstraps. No, it doesn't. It's not a family, you twat. You tell me the last time a family printed its own fucking currency and I'll give you a tenner. How about that? You fucking idiots. The country's got no money. Really? Are you sure about that? Are you fucking sure? So there's no point in having bonds and yields and gilts and any of that shit then, is there? At all. We don't print money from thin air and lend it at all to anybody. No. The reason why that dozy bitch Liz Truss failed is she tried to do way too much way too quickly. Tax cuts are good. They are. Like, you have to be a dumbass not to fucking agree with that, right? But giving it to the rich people who don't need it don't want it. It's a stupid fucking idea, and that's what she tried to do. She tried to do steroids trickle down economics, basically, which is crazy. Goodbye, Rooks, forever. I'll see you tomorrow. I'm still on my little ramble while smoking spliff. That's an insult to dogs, by the way. I don't know. Who am I insulting? The dogs. I think he's referring to Liz Truss. She's a twat. Anyway, she tried to do way too much too fast, and she literally got it wrong anyway by trying to give it to rich people. Even rich people aren't that stupid. They're like, whoa, stop making it worse for us, please. Like, everyone knows we're stupidly fucking rich. Don't give us more money, because you're just making us look bad. Wink, wink. So yeah, bit funny, innit? And now you got people saying on the left, which I found fucking funny the other day. I was watching Nevada Media or some shit. Oh no, Owen Jones, you know, the guy who writes for The Guardian. And he's like, Keir Starmer's a cunt or whatever. He didn't specifically say that, to be fair on him. But he was implying that the left was some shit. Should be upset at Keir Starmer because he's like Tony Blair. The last time I checked, motherfucker, Tony Blair won 3 elections. I would like Tony Blair back, please. I mean, that's a joke in my Discord, actually. Between us nerdy political people in my Discord. We actually say, bring back Tony Blair, we'd win a fucking election. I mean, I did like Jeremy Corbyn. I did. I mean, I've never seen anybody who was running for Prime Minister get an entire fucking song. When was the last time? If anybody can tell me the last time anyone sang a Prime Minister's name at a football stadium, I'll give it a tenner. Because the only one I fucking know, and I've been around for a long time, is Mr. Jeremy Corbyn. And you know the song, people. You know the song. Just saying. Now, did the right wing hate the idea of Jeremy Corbyn being PM? Fuck, yes, they fucking did. Don't be stupid. And I can document. I wish I had my old channel with all my old videos, because you'd be so interested in the fact that, holy shit, what's that? They tried to do the same thing with Ed Miliband. They called Ed Miliband's dad Red Ed. No, they called him Red Ed, and then said Ed Miliband's dad is a Russian spy. Right? They literally said that in the newspapers. And then he got sacked. Which is mad. Also, they said Jeremy Corbyn was a Russian spy. And they said he's a Jew hater, which is kind of funny. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn literally has an allotment. Do you know any racist with an allotment? Because I fucking don't. Thankfully. Point being is, this country is fucking mental. And it's being run by Tories for way longer than you think. In terms of economic policies. And that's what's fucked the country. They've sold the post office. I mean, that alone just boggles my mind. What are you doing with the post office? We're selling it. What? Yeah. We're going to sell the fucking post office. To who? Exactly. Our mates. Wait, what? You're going to sell the post office to a private company? Yeah. Okay. So, what happened to all that tax that I paid to make the post office the post office? It's going back to the treasury, boy. So I don't get paid at all. No, it's not very capitalistic, is it? See, anytime the government sells anything when it comes to public sector, I should get paid. Everyone should get paid. Everyone should get a fucking dividend, basically. Everybody. What's the fucking point? It's not like I have to, shop around. It's the fucking post office. They did it with the water. Did it with the gas. You pay tax to France and Germany. Do you know that? Your buses are German and your electricity's fucking French. I love the word British gas because it's owned by the French. Which is fucking hilarious. That alone should be taken to court under the Trading Standards Act for fucking misleading people. It literally says a British gas, but it's not owned by Britain. How mental is that? British gas, isn't it? It's British. It's French. EDF. It's so stupid. French are laughing at tits off, clearly. Like stupid fucking English people. So busy up their own arse, they don't know just they're getting robbed. Fuck. Can I just play a clip? Hopefully, I won't get sued. I'm not going to play this. Can I? Oh, I can't even play because I'm on a different fucking program. God damn it. See what happens when you have different programs to stream. Anyway, I was going to play Monty Python, the sketch, King of the Britons. I think it's the best sketch I've ever seen and will ever see in my entire life. I am King of the Britons. The fuck are they? Anyway, I think I rambled for fucking like longer than the show's been on for. So I'm gonna bid you farewell. Yeah, bit of old English for you there. And enjoy my spliff. And catch you tomorrow, I suppose. 12:15. Yeah, that's what's fucking Wednesday for some reason. Anywho, have a good day. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you for listening to my random shit at the end.